Hello and welcome to another My ND/NT Marriage video. We had a situation where we made some friends and it changed the dynamic of the relationship. Now obviously I need to take you back a little bit because all stories have a start, an ending and a beginning, and all manner of things that happened to us in the past shape us. So, to start with, he didn't have people that he confided in or spoke to. He went about doing everything himself, thinking that he had all of the answers. I, on the other hand, was speaking to my mum and my best friend and saying to them, this is a conversation we had, this was the outcome, it didn't go well, what can I say and do next time? And we'd be brainstorming, trying to figure out a way that we could have conversations that would resolve issues. And he'd be really agitated and he'd come sort of storming over when I was on the phone and be really annoyed that I was telling people these things about him. And he would demand that I not. He would tell me, I don't want you telling people what's going on with us. And I would say, is that because you know that what you're doing isn't okay? And he'd say, no, because it's personal, private business. And I would say to him, look, clearly we're not working things out and we don't seem to know how to. It's really important to get support and feedback. Anyway, that was yet another clash that went on between the two of us for quite some time. It was never a situation where my friends firstly were ever able to help. They weren't. And he never sought help himself or anything like this. He just was so sort of sure that he had this, even though the proof was in the pudding and neither of us had it. Neither of us really knew what we were doing and we couldn't get the relationship to work. When I say work, I mean we were working, kind of plodding along, but we couldn't seem to resolve anything and we just didn't seem to have the skills to pull anything off. And I mean, I had no idea what was going on with him anyway, so that's the start of it, right? He doesn't have people he confides in. He thinks confiding in people is weird and wrong. And so we're plodding along, really struggling. And we had acquaintances, such as, say, neighbours up the road who would have us over for a barbecue and things like this, or people he knew from work, his family, my family. He's got friends, but they're not close. He doesn't talk with his family and friends about anything. So he was never getting any advice. So it was never, for example, him going up to his friends and saying, she won't mow the lawn the way that I want, she won't hang out the washing the way that I want, she won't do the dishes the way that I want, she won't cut an onion the way that I want, etc, etc, etc. And then that person could turn around and go, mate, she's not meant to. That's not what relationships are about. It's not meant to be you having 100% of control and she's just doing everything you tell her. And because he doesn't have that, he's never finding this out. He just thought his way was the right way and I was always wrong. Anytime I would say to him that's not how relationships work, he would say, how do you know? And I knew because I'm seeking advice from people and he wasn't. And he didn't equate that to, maybe I've got a little bit more knowledge about this than you. Anyway, major dramas, lots of conflict. So we finally meet these friends. I don't know how long ago, 8 years maybe. And they actually started coming away with us, them and their children. So we'd go on holidays and they would come on holidays with us and things like this. And so how it ended up helping the marriage is that they were so zany that it made him realise that he had actually a good relationship. So, she was hypersexual. She was one of those poor women who thinks that sex is the only thing she's got going for her. It's her best attribute. And her goal in life seems to be getting all these other men to find her attractive, whether they're in relationships or not. It's how she builds and finds her value. It's a bit tragic, it's a bit sad. It is what it is. On top of that, she was an alcoholic. So she would get drunk and be quite inappropriate with my husband. So for example, we're at a gathering and she just suddenly blurts out and says, "Hey, do you mind if I sleep with your husband?" And everybody stops and they're staring and they're waiting for my reply. And I say, pretty sure that he doesn't want to, and just leave it at that, right? She slumps in her chair, her husband says absolutely nothing, and this was how the relationship was sort of prodding along. She flashed her breasts at him at one stage, she jumped on a trampoline with him and hurt his back really badly, and that really annoyed me because I can accidentally hurt my husband. Like, let's say I stood on his foot and hurt his toe, and he will explode like I have deliberately gone up and punched him in the nads. Like, his reaction is so over the top for the small injury that occurred, and yet she deliberately jumped on his back and he laughed it off. That did annoy me because I was thinking, where's her bollocks? Where's her bollocking, you know? Come on. Fair's fair. On top of that, they had really badly behaved children. They would break our children's toys. They would eat like they were in a pigsty. Like, the kitchen always looked like a bomb had hit it after they'd gone in and had lunch. And she didn't clean up after them. Oh my God. That would stress me out. I would then go in, like, we're on holiday together sharing a kitchen. I'd then have to go in and clean up and, oh Jesus, or her husband would help, but not her. And so at the start, when we're visiting them, she would invite us over like on a Friday or Saturday night. She'd had a cleaner during the day on Fridays. Every Friday she had a cleaner come. And we'd go there and the house was immaculate. Looked like a display home, beautiful place. But then as the friendship progressed, we started visiting just outside of that Friday and Saturday sort of timetable. And so hubby started to see that their house looked as lived in as ours did. They had dog fur here and there and crumbs on the kitchen floor and the counters that weren't wiped down and all of that kind of lived in stuff. And so he started to realise for the first time ever that other people did live the same as we did, just like I'd been telling him was the case for years. And he hadn't believed me because what do I know? Which incidentally, I will just interject here, it's a known fact apparently from autism experts that people on the spectrum often don't believe things that their partners say. They tend to be only listening to experts and facts and figures. So I can tell him something actually factual. Snow is white and it's cold. And he may debate that because it's coming from me. And so I'm telling him for years, how we live is not messy. The house is not terrible. You're dreaming. You're imagining problems that aren't there. And he was just so insistent that I just couldn't keep up on top of the house and wasn't doing a good enough job, yada yada yada. And that he just imagined that everybody else's homes were immaculate because when you go over to their house, they're clean before you get there. Anyway, so we make this friendship and he starts to realise that other people live in just as sort of chaotic atmosphere as we do, because this is life. You have children, you have pets, they're messy. You cook, you clean, there's dishes, there's, this is life. So he started to see for the first time ever, because we finally had these mutual friends, that his life was quite good. We were cleaner than them, ironically, because I don't have a cleaner on a Friday. Our house was tidier than theirs. Our children were tidier than theirs. Great example. We all went out for dinner and they had a nanny as well. So there was us sitting at our table and the nanny in between and them sitting there. So the tables were joined, but the nanny was in between us. And we're just eating away at this restaurant. And suddenly the nanny says, "Look at the difference between the two." And I'm sitting next to her, so I look over and see what she's talking about. And their table looked like they'd had a food fight. And our table was immaculate, pristine. There was not a crumb anywhere because my children kind of don't miss their mouths or something. I don't know what's going on with their children, but yeah, it looked like they'd had a food fight. Now, the friend was really angry at the nanny for approaching this, like saying it. And they're all trying to clean the table, but I'm a bit like, it's too late, we've seen it already. But that's just an example of what I mean, is that hubby started to realise that we weren't this terrible, bad family that he'd always thought we were. We were neater than them. I was not hypersexual like her. He may have accused me of being an alcoholic with Counsellor Terry, but this lady really was an alcoholic. She would start drinking and then just get blotto, to the point where our husband said, you're going to have to hide the alcohol because she'll just keep going. So he started to realise from them that what he had in his world was actually quite good. And this is one of the sort of harder complications about being on the spectrum, because they tend to be sort of more about self. They're not really sort of necessarily friend-seeking people. They don't necessarily have a lot of friends around them. They may not confide in those friends. They don't find out from having conversations with others how other people live and how the world goes round. They kind of get stuck in their own little thought bubble of how they live is how everybody lives. And there's nothing outside of that. And without developing those friendships where you can actually approach people and say, hey, what do I do about this, and is this normal, and how do we resolve these issues, and yada yada, what do we do? And this is why I have personally found counselling quite helpful, because the counsellors get to tell him things that I've been trying to tell him, but of course coming from them, it makes more sense. So yeah, that was that friendship. It actually helped our relationship in ways that I would have never imagined. We did end up ditching those friends, mainly because her children were just so badly behaved towards mine that I was disturbed by her children, to be quite honest. I didn't think that my children were going to be safe around them. And she was hard to bear anyway, just being drunk all the time and hypersexual. There was one time, I have to laugh about this. We were sitting on the couch, her on one couch, my husband and I on the other, and she actually says to me, in her drunken state, what do you bring to the relationship? And I was thinking, wow, that's just so rude, it's not funny. And I mean, there were a million things I could have said. I could have said, well, I don't bring alcoholism or hypersexuality, and I have immaculately behaved children who are really clean and neat. But what I said to her was, great sex, because I kind of knew it would bug her. And it did. She fell. She was crestfallen. You could see it. And she turns to my hubby, like for confirmation, and says, really? And he beamed. I thought, thank God. He beamed, goes, like this. And she just goes, oh. So, blew up in her face. But that was just the kind of person she was. She just wanted to have my husband like her more and just try to slip her little slippery ways in here and there. But it had the opposite effect. It made him appreciate me more. It made him realise that I'm not this terrible wife, I'm not this terrible mum, I'm not this terrible housekeeper. Anyway, worked out for the best. And how about you? Have you had situations where friendships have helped your relationship, or maybe they've hindered them? Drop a comment below, love to hear from you, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate it.